Hello, hello. Thank you guys for joining us to A Naked Combo With. Today we have the Skinny Dippers Club. That is Mandy and Jeremy. You can find them on skinnydippers.com or I'm sorry, skinnydippersclub.com, or you can find them on Twitter as at Mandy Linka. I'm not sure if I
Yeah, that's close.
mispronounced your name. Selinka. Okay, I'll have all these links in the description in case I didn't make justice to her last name. Guys, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. How are you guys doing?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you for
happy to
being
be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, guys. Today I want to talk a little bit about you guys and also what you have going on in Naturism, especially because I think you guys have a really interesting project going on, the Skinny Dippers Club, and we'd like to learn all about it, but we also want to learn about the people that are behind it. So, Mandy, Jeremy, who would you say you guys are? Like, can you give us a quick introduction for the people who are not familiar with what you guys are doing and who you guys are?
Currently, we are a online community for nudists and naturous. We really want to promote social nudity and naturism to everyone and show that it's normal and fun and awesome. And we we went on so many trips that we found that the people in this community are just so awesome that we wanted to make sure that we could hang out with them when we couldn't be at the nudist parks or resorts or what have you. So we decided to create a community that was online, and we actually decided to do that prior to the pandemic, and it's really worked out to be an awesome thing to have through the pandemic. um, Jeremy has to work all day and he's in a government role. So I actually watch him like run in the house at night and get so excited to jump into our community and chat with all of our friends because
Friends.
it's like we get to hang out with nude people, 24/7. But I think the key to what makes it so great is that it is behind a paywall and I'm the moderator. So I'm the Mark Zuckerberg. So we actually have people in there that really appreciate the paywall and being able to talk to their friends without it being out in the public. We've been noticing, everybody's been noticing that people are getting kicked off Instagram left and right. And it's so nice to know that I'm not going to lose my friends, because they're in our paid community. And it's a paid community. It's about the same price as Netflix. And the point of that is so that we can pay to maintain the site and upgrade. Like we just added a chat, which has been people have been really loving being able to chat in there, which is cool. So did I do it justice?
I think
did I
you
miss
did.
anything?
No, I think you got it.
Okay, and who is Jeremy? Jeremy, who you are, where do you come from? Tell us a little bit about your experience in naturism. How did you get started and all that good stuff?
Oh, sure. So I originally came from the Portland metro area, and Mandy and I moved to Seattle about 6 years ago. And throughout my whole career, I've been in government jobs, government positions. And when I came up here, I played more of a behind the scenes role. So I felt a little bit more comfortable being out and about at nude beaches and getting to know other people in the social nude setting. So about 3 years ago, I really took the plunge and started hanging out with a non-landed group, and eventually I got my spouse to come along to some places. And
I did, but I don't want you to leave out how you actually got into it. It was so I was doing I was teaching online marketing courses, and so I was in all these Facebook groups, and he was like, I think I'm a nudist. I need to do this. It's a little bit of a midlife crisisy type of thing, And so he jumped into Facebook groups, unbeknownst to me. He finds these Facebook groups, jumps into them, and they're predominantly LGBTQ. Facebook groups, and he ended up having these wonderful experiences. I'm gonna let you take over.
Yeah.
And that's how you got.
Yeah, so actually I found a group. It was called the Puget Sound Skinny Dippers, and which has since been disbanded, but it was a group predominantly of gay and bi males, and they like to go around and hit different nude spots. And I just thought, well, that sounds kind of cool, because I'm dipping my toe in the water. And I ended up connecting with a couple of guys that we became really good friends, and we just started going around to different places. And I
You're always
experienced,
having these pool parties.
yeah, it was
I'm
like every
starting to get
weekend
really jealous.
was a party.
Awesome.
It seemed like.
He'd be gone all day, and he'd come home and just be like, I hung out in the pool with my friends all day naked. And I was like, that sounds amazing.
Exactly.
And how did you
So
get
that's kind
started?
of how.
I was supposed to speak at this creative entrepreneurs conference in Palm Springs, and I don't duck out on responsibility, but I was so burnt out from working. You know, being an entrepreneur is just, you're constantly working. And I was like, I didn't write the speech. It was like 2 weeks before it. I didn't write the speech. Oh my God, I don't want to do this. And Jeremy was like, sweet, don't do it. And he doesn't shirk responsibility either. So I was like, what? Which now I get it. His whole thing was like, come to the nude place with me. And
I mean, we were going to Palm Springs anyway, so why not go to a nude place in Palm Springs where it's warm?
And I was so burnt out that I was like, fine, I don't care where we have to go, as long as like I don't have to do anything. So we go, and 3 days into it, I realized I was the only one that cared about the fact that, you know, naked people were running around, and he was in the pool enjoying all of these people, having all of these conversations, extroverting all over the pool. And I'm like hiding behind a book with my bikini on. And all the people there were so nice, you know, it was obvious that I was a newbie because I was the only one in clothes. But finally I was like, this is stupid. I want to do this. So I jumped in. It was great.
Literally, I think you like took off your bikini and came and joined me in the pool, and I was like, cool, she's in.
Finally.
I think
Yeah, exactly.
Clothing optional for me was really the gateway drug.
Mhm.
So I think because of Mandy's experience, we have a tendency to really talk to people who are entering into the world of naturism and being nude and socially nude. So because it's still a fresh memory for her, and every time we talk to new folks, we're reminded about what it's like to first come in and experience it. So we really try to be sure that we talk to like that audience or those people, so that we can be welcoming to those folks.
Well, and I think that the experiences that we've had of feeling welcomed have been very low, considering to the in contrast to the bad experiences we've had. So we are almost like overly gracious when people are trying to figure out what they're doing, because oh my God, I don't ever want to treat anyone the way that I have been treated at some of these places. So
Wow. Is it, you guys have had a lot of negative experiences?
I think we've had 80% negative to 20%.
How is that? Tell us more about it.
I think a lot of it is nudism in the States. And we haven't done any nude vacations or experiences outside of the country.
You haven't. I have.
Oh, you have. That's right.
Yeah.
He went to the Dominican Republic to a place on his own.
Oh.
Yeah. He's like,
Okay.
I need a vacation on my own. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So yeah, and he had a great experience.
It was a wonderful experience. But let's talk about what we've experienced here.
Yeah. So actually, I think all of our bad experience have been at nudist parks in the States. And I don't know enough history to explain. I know that Evan at Naturous Vintage would absolutely probably have the answer to this, but I know that a lot of the clubs in the States, not clubs, am I saying that right? Nudist parks. In the States were started way back in the day by predominantly white people, and you know that's been the guiding theme throughout all of it. And that, you know, they're aging out, they aren't bringing newer people into the fold.
Yes.
Like we're seeing that on a global level. So I know that's not a surprise, but what happens is these just archaic rules. And this whole movement to me is about not only about body positivity, but it's about consent. It's about autonomy over your own body, like having control over what you do. So, you know, going to these old nudist parks in the States, and not all of them, just a majority, because we have had a good experience at the Willamettons in Eugene. And that's, I truly believe that part of the reason that experience was great was not only because it was very diverse, there was tons of young people, but they're in a college town. And so they're more on the progressive side of things because they're just closer to, you know, the youth and the diversity. And anytime you add youth and diversity, you get a much better flavor to your setting, right? So these other places that are predominantly white, predominantly steeped in this old A&R culture of like, you have to be totally nude and you have to be straight and you have to come with a person. He went to a park that's by us that we were going to try out, and you have to tell that experience because that was just so bizarre.
So I went to a park nearby, and I think part of the, let me start by saying, I think part of the bad experience that we have from time to time is, as much as I am free and open about being without clothes, anytime I go to a new place, it takes me just a little while to be comfortable, to strip down, just because I want to get a lay of the land, get a feel for the people, you know, to kind of double check to make sure that I'm in a safe place.
You want to make sure that you're safe before you get even more vulnerable, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's anyway, it's just one of those things. It takes me a little while to feel comfortable in a new setting to strip off and be nude. But once I am, it's great once I feel comfortable. And I don't know, maybe it's the parks that we've been to, maybe they're uncomfortable with the fact that it takes us a few minutes longer than a lot of their regular attendees to strip off all your clothes. But I got to tell you about this one experience. I went to a park with a friend, a guy friend. We were actually going up to check out what their volleyball court looked like because we wanted to see whether or not we could have a volleyball tournament there. And when I went, you had to jump through a bunch of hoops to get there because they don't have cell phone service at their park. So you get close enough to this town and then you call and they send somebody up to the front desk and
you
then
released your dove with a note.
Yeah. But you finally get there, and I'm checking in, and I hand him one of my cards. It was either TNS or AANR, and he goes, you have another person on here, and I said, yeah, that's my wife, and he goes, well, you're here, so I'll let you in, but next time you need to come back with a notarized document giving you permission from your wife to be here. So you can't come back without a notarized letter.
Okay.
That was the same. Yeah, I was perplexed as well.
After you'd driven how long through the hills and the woods to get there?
Yeah, it was, an hour and a half drive. We already live kind of in the boonies, and there was another hour and a half drive further into the boonies to find this place. And then I was completely perplexed that was the first thing I was being addressed with.
Yeah. So basically, if I understand correctly, you guys have more of a preference for a clothing optional setting. So you like to ease into the nude aspect. It's that, and the fact that some of these are just like really, really old school mentality type of places that I don't know. I mean, I've never heard of a notarized letter by your wife, but I have heard a lot of cases of people that have been just denied access because they're single males, or any male that arrives by himself is considered a single male. And when I say by himself, I mean not with another woman, because in some places, even gay couples are considered to be two single males. And I think that comes from a really, I'm not sure what the word is in English, but like really old school mind that men can't behave and
Mhm.
that they need
Right.
to be with a woman in order to control themselves from the impulses, I guess, they get when they see another woman naked, which is, I don't know, it's
Well, and
ridiculous.
it's interesting when I was part of the non-landed club that was predominantly bi and gay men, we actually encountered issues going to some of the parks because they wouldn't let in a non-landed club of what they called single men. And I remember having a conversation with a couple of the guys. It was one of the leaders of the group where he said that the reason why we couldn't go to a particular park is because the park didn't believe that we were all um, comfortable as nudists, and that we weren't out there trying to just come in as single guys to scope out the women. Or maybe we were going to do some kind of promiscuous behavior because we were a group of men from the LGBT community. So that attitude is really pervasive out there in some of the parks, and I think that's why we like the beaches.
Well, and that's also why we tend to like the clothing optional parks, because what we noticed is that once you have a clothing optional space instead of strictly nude, you end up with a way more diverse clientele and you end up with
Mhm.
a lot more younger people. So, um,
I think that's interesting because the community that we have here in Guadalajara evolved from a clothing optional. It wasn't necessarily a community; it was a group of friends, and it turned into a nude mandatory um, place. And the reason why we decided to do that was because we had several occasions where women would tell us that they wanted to get naked, but they felt like they were going to be the only ones because it was
oh,
generally
interesting.
men naked, women topless. So after a while, this was more of a decision that Andrea, my wife, considered to be a good idea because me as a guy, I couldn't, you know, impose that on women. It's like whatever they feel comfortable
Right.
with. But we came to the conclusion, and she told me that the fact that in this case, women that were going to the place didn't feel comfortable because they probably wanted to get naked initially, but then they felt self-conscious because a couple of women or more women were not completely naked. So after that, we noticed that we had more participation of women, and it
Yeah.
was easier for them to just get naked the moment that they arrive. And the way that we set everything up was the moment that you arrive, everyone is naked. And like even the receptionist and everyone is naked. So it's like really natural to just arrive, take off your clothes, and participate with everyone else. And it's set up for the moment that the person enters, they pass the reception, and then it's the place where you leave your clothing and your cell phone or whatever, and then they go hang out with everyone else.
Oh, that
But
makes
I
sense.
I
Kind of like a
do,
gym.
huh?
Like,
Yeah,
how
kind of
you
like
put
a
all your
gym.
stuff in the locker room and then head
Yeah,
out. That
yeah,
makes
and
sense.
I understand that there's different audiences, but what we make very clear to the people that participate is that it's uh, they have to they have to be addressed. So the people that arrive there are already well informed and well decided. It's not like they arrive and say, "Hey, you know, you have to do this." It's more like from the beginning. But I do believe that there's probably a couple of people who would like to ease into it, and what we suggest to them is to go to clothing optional settings. There are some clothing optional communities, which gives them variety. And there's also like public beaches like Cipolite, where people can go and try it out um, at their own pace.
And
So,
I think the key, and you mentioned it a couple times as you were speaking, was the clear communication.
mhm,
Absolutely.
And I think that could be part of what's missing at a lot of these parks where we've
It,
had
it is.
where
It
we've
is.
had the bad experiences is you don't know what to expect, because
Yeah.
you show up at some parks and people are fully clothed in reception, in the reception area. We've showed up at parks where people are completely nude in the reception area. Some places require clothing in the pool area, some don't. Some don't enforce the rules. So when you walk in and you're really uncomfortable and you're really unsure, I think that sets you up for failure or sets you up for a bad experience from the get-go.
Yeah.
Well, and I've experienced a lot of shaming by older women at nudist parks. And yeah, like Jeremy said, I tend to like leave my bikini on. And honestly, part of that is because I have a lot to keep in there. So sometimes I prefer, when I'm checking things out, to just keep them tight and, do my
Make
thing before
sure they're safe.
yeah, get settled in, to find out where I want to lay out. And I've been shamed for wearing clothes around the pool when all I was doing was checking out the area. So I think there's just a lot of die-hard older people in the States that are, rah, you must be this and that. And it's like, you know what? That's not how people live. We're not just defined by one thing.
Well, and I think the environment makes a difference, like the actual geographic location. So we live in the Pacific Northwest. We're just outside of the Seattle area, and we get about 3 days worth. No,
That's what it feels like.
It feels like we have about 3 days of summer, but you don't get a lot of summer. And even in the middle of summer, oftentimes evenings are cold, or they have a light wind. And frankly, so this shirt that I'm wearing, it's a cotton shirt, and you'll see me in this almost all the time. Even at nudist parks in the evenings, or when the temperature is a little lower, I often have like that Donald Duck look. I'll wear a shirt and no pants because I'm either a little chilly, or sometimes, for the most part, I don't like to wear sunscreen. I'd rather cover up. So I'll wear this shirt without pants, just to keep my back from getting sunburned. And
I think that's another key thing that gets missed too, is that, and I talked about this the other day, I can't remember where, but my mom, who is a boomer, who's 70, I used to watch her lay out in the sun all baby oiled up. And I, who am 40 years younger than her, 30, whatever, I'm like, oh, I can only, I need the vitamin D, but I also don't want the cancer. So like, I feel like that's a discussion that gets left out when you aren't inviting younger people and people that are diverse into your community, because you would have younger people, or, people that pay attention to climate change, say, hey, I know it's a nude only place, but people may actually want to cover up because the sun is really strong,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it's good to have variety. I don't think that there's one fits all approach. Like, I don't believe that the nude mandatory is the way to go, or that clothing optional is the way to go, or that whatever in between. I think that people should have options, and that sometimes it's really difficult because there's not that many places around. And then it's the other thing that you mentioned, that there's no expectation, there's no communication, there's no, like, a lot of clubs in the States especially are very clandestine or hidden or like secretive places.
Oh yeah.
and sometimes that they're there, but getting to them is a nightmare. And then once you arrive, you don't know what to expect. And normally when they're like residential areas, at least when we went to Florida, we noticed that some of them are like retirement homes. And and the problem is that, like, even when you see the menu and everything that is like set up is for this specific audience. So like, we received the menu and everything was like almost chewed up food. It's like mashed potatoes, gravy, but like the entire menu is set up for this demographic. So it's obvious that you arrive there and you feel kind of left out. Like it's not, I don't know, you like you have to be in a retirement home vibe.
Yeah.
And I think that probably lends to some of our negative experiences that we've had.
The young people.
Yeah.
Who did those young people think they are, running around with clothes on? That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, I'm just trying to have a good time here. I mean no harm by having my bikini on right now.
I started going to these nudist parks at age 45, and I was the young guy.
Yeah.
Which is why we love beaches.
And beaches attracts a much more diverse audience. And I think what I really like about public settings is that you can't impose a specific criteria. Well, there are places that are public that are nude mandatory, but generally just it's like whatever you want, as long as you don't harass or make people feel uncomfortable because you're doing something that you shouldn't, like invasive behavior. That's another problem in public settings. Sometimes it attracts creeps.
Yeah. Well, no matter where you go, you're going to have a small segment of creeps somehow. I mean, even in the best run events and settings, you have people that overindulge in alcohol, or they may overindulge in something else, or they're just masking their creepiness, and they manage to slip in. So that's something that it always has to be monitored, and it doesn't matter where you are, and it's something you have to be aware of. And I think that's why it takes us a little bit of time to when you walk into a setting, to strip down. Although, to your point, when you have the clear instructions, communications expectations, if you walk right in and you need to strip down, I felt pretty comfortable in some of those settings too. We had part of our non-landed club, we would like once a month we'd treat ourselves to going to the Korean spa. We'd get a body scrub and hang out in the spa, and at that place.
You were more well groomed than I was at that point.
I know. I want the Korean spa to open up again. Dang COVID. But we would go in and spend time in the cold pool and the hot tub and the steam room and the sauna, and it was just so nice.
Then you'd go eat that delicious food afterwards.
Yeah, then we'd go. There was
the Asian buffet.
Yeah, there was an Asian buffet place right next door. It was phenomenal. Wow. But
sounds like paradise.
Yeah, exactly. But they had uniforms that you would put on. So if you weren't in the wet area, then you had these shorts and a smock. It almost looked like medical scrubs. So everybody looked the same. You were either nude or you had the uniform on if you weren't in the wet area. And I really liked that setting.
Yeah, it's about managing expectations and also being transparent. And another thing that we have is we've created a lot of content around our events, like documenting the events. So when someone is starting out, they have a lot to consume and they know exactly what they're getting themselves into.
Perfect.
which was a very important part of what we wanted to do. We wanted people to know exactly what they were getting themselves into, because sometimes we had the same experience that you would go and then it seemed informal. You didn't know what was going on. You didn't know if you had to undress or not, or it's just so many. And also the lack of guidelines allows sometimes inappropriate behavior. Like, for example, we don't allow photography in our events unless it's in a place where no one is around. Like, we have designated areas where people can take pictures, or we are documenting, but when we document, people have to sign consent, and we give them like a specific band or something, like a color, that whoever's taking pictures or video can identify that this person wants to be in it and this person doesn't. So it's like very clear indications, so the person knows. Like, sometimes we get asked, I want to participate, but I don't want to be in the videos. It's like, oh, don't worry. It's actually harder to be in the videos than it is not to be in the videos. So you're okay.
Well, we love the wristband idea. In fact, we were just talking about that in one of our podcasts, and because we've experienced wristband colors for a couple different settings, and one of them is when you go to visit a place for the first time. There's some of the clubs that require you to visit 3 times before you can be a full-blown member. Mm-hmm. And at first I was a little put off by that style of wristband procedure, but then Mandy and I experienced it where we had longtime members come up and interact with us, kind of go over the rules. We had
It made it far more social to
Yeah.
run
Oh, yeah.
around with this wristband that says, "Hey, I'm new here."
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's like a
It gave you-
welcome me wristband.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was awesome.
yeah, exactly.
We made friends.
Yeah, it was a great experience. So at first when we thought about the wristband idea, I was like, yeah, does that really work? But then we've experienced it and it does work. We like it. And um I don't know. I don't know where the idea came from for using a wristband for photo consent, but that's something that we've actually set up in our community too. We've got a consent form, and if you want to participate, and we haven't had a full blown in-person event yet because we're still new and we started our club during
And
COVID.
COVID.
But we have everything set up so that you can wear appropriately colored wristband that corresponds to the photo waiver. So I love that idea, and I'm hoping it works for us as well.
I'm pretty sure it will, but what I recommend is to start the culture. It's really hard, especially one of the challenges that these clubs face is that they want diversity and younger people and so on, but they have been around for such a long time that they have a culture that is very ingrained in the place that trying to modify that culture has a lot of resistance. So the thing that we did was we made sure our members were accustomed to evolution and change and things like that. Um, at first, no one wanted to be in the pictures, so we asked them to turn around and their butts facing to
Oh
the
yeah, the
camera.
boobies.
And then said after several events, we asked them to turn around and so on. And then when we passed from photography to video, some people didn't want to be in it, others did. Then they saw the videos, they liked them. They noticed that a lot of people started coming because of that, because content is very important to promote what you have going on. And then they want to feel like they are a part of it. So that leads more and more people to want to participate in the future. And then before you know it, you get people that have never participated in naturism, but are super excited to be in the photos or in the videos or things like that.
Yeah.
But it's a work in
Somehow it's real.
progress, and it's easier. I think the future of naturism are going to be non-landed clubs because they're cheaper, they're quicker to set up, and they allow a lot of variety. Like you can have a non-landed club of couples or a non-landed club of families or a non-landed club of LGBT or like whatever you want, because it's so easy to get it going compared to buying land, building a pool, and you know.
Right.
Yeah, and especially the price of land as we've seen the real estate market, surge. That's definitely an inhibitor to being able to be successful in that older model. And then once you build that out,
Who's maintaining it?
Who's maintaining it? I mean, that's something that we've seen in a lot of these situations. We actually live in a nudist community, and last year was the wettest winter on record for, I don't know, the last 80 years or something like that in the state of Washington. And we have a creek that runs through the property. There's some natural springs. Actually, the whole hillside is riddled with springs. It's a beautiful place, and there's people who paraglide just above us. It's like one of the state's destinations for paragliders, parasailers, whatever it is. They float around above us. But the rain hit us so hard that it washed out an entire area where we usually have a spot for RVs to come in and camp during the summertime. That whole area got washed out. It endangered wiping out our pool and sauna area. It
Wow.
was terrible. And then because we were closed for COVID and we didn't have volunteers coming up to help our members, all of that work is set there kind of half done because there hasn't been enough people to help. And there's been so many COVID restrictions that it's just enough was done to protect the infrastructure, but we can see. Uh-oh, what happened?
We lost you there.
Are we back?
Yep.
Sorry.
No,
Someone
that's
was
fine.
trying to call me.
Okay.
Oh.
but there was so much damage done that we haven't had the volunteer capacity to come back and do anything more than just make sure that our assets aren't further in danger. So, when we do open, who's going to want to come back to a park that looks like it's in shambles? It's going to require a lot more work and a lot of work to get the members re-engaged and come out and work in the nude, I guess, to get the park ready to go for visitors. So that's a struggle.
Yeah, and that's another thing. The infrastructure generally already exists through Airbnb or through just private venues that you can rent out. So it's not necessary to go through the work, the hassle, the investment. And I think another problem that you mentioned is that most of these clubs rely on volunteers, and that's great to build community, but it doesn't make it sustainable in the long term. You need to have a financially viable, sustainable business model that allows resources to be allocated to the necessities. If this place where you guys live had a solid business model, they would have taken care of that immediately.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of these places don't actually look at themselves as businesses, and I go round and round with this because I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. I've owned a brick and mortar. Like I'm a business girl. So when I call somewhere and they're like, you have to do all of these things to be able to visit us, I'm like, that's just bad business. Like, of course, I understand why they have some of these things, in place, and I respect that, but it doesn't make it right. And if these places actually looked at themselves as a business, then they would treat things differently, and they would probably be more prosperous.
And I think there's a good intention behind not managing it as a business, but it sometimes good intentions aren't good enough, and sometimes good intentions could have detrimental outcomes. And I think in this case, good intentions aren't enough to make this a good experience, to make it viable for more people, to make it sustainable, to make it profitable, to make it, it's difficult. And
and if you're going to own 40 acres of land and then have people come to it, that's something to maintain. Like you have to maintain that every season. Something different happens every season, whether it's cutting back the trees in the spring or what have you. And if you don't have that checklist that you're doing every year,
and there's a
pretty soon it becomes unmanageable.
There's a huge resistance in the naturist community to avoid monetizing it, to avoid making it profitable, because they feel like that's going to somehow lower the quality of the philosophy of the movement. But I don't think that philosophy of a movement is necessarily directly related to the business model that it follows, because there is a business model. It's just not a good business model. And
right.
And the thing is that this is making it less accessible for people. If naturism was mainstream, it would be more accessible and there would be more variety. And these hardcore philosophical naturists would have a better experience themselves as everyone else. But somehow it's something that people are resistant. And I think it has a lot to do with the history of the movement and how it's been very deeply influenced by a very hippie mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it goes back to the generation. As we were speaking, a friend of mine, his son is really into mountain biking. And I didn't realize that there is a bunch of mountain biking parks around the Pacific Northwest. Mm-hmm. And people take their mountain bikes, they pay a fee, they go in and they ride the maintained trails. Some of them actually have tow ropes so you can tow yourself up to the top and then
that's cool.
And then come down. But there's fees associated with that, and they've changed the business model in such a way that people can enjoy the outdoors, they can enjoy the activity, and it's well maintained. I know that in my conversations with him, he was talking about the fact that it seems odd that I'd have to go pay money to go somewhere to mountain bike because there's all these other trails that are available for free. But if he wants that particular experience of being in an enclosed specific space dedicated to that mountain biking with maintained trails and upgraded amenities and restrooms and all of those things, he's going to pay a fee for that. And I think that is something that some of these nudist parks and some of these business models need to recognize, is that people will pay for the experience, especially if you have the clear communication and expectations around what will happen within that confined space. And you don't make them jump through hoops and get a notarized letter from your wife saying it's okay to be there.
That's probably one of the most ridiculous things I've heard.
Yeah.
And Mandy is not going to give you permission to.
I think after she heard that, she's like, hell no, I'm not going to sign a letter like that.
You want me to do what?
So tell
She's
us
okay with me going, but not doing the letter.
Tell us a little bit about how Skinny Dippers got started. What was the thought process that went into like this community? So as far as I understand, it's a closed social media network for naturists. I think that it's probably a little bit more focused on clothing optional than it is hardcore nudity. Is that correct?
It doesn't matter. We're open to anyone.
So it's like a social media for naturists, and they can share like whatever they want, like Facebook, for example, but for nudies.
Yeah, totally. It's like, so I say it's like an old school Facebook group, and the Facebook groups were really good, and they weren't being, super policed, and there weren't a ton of ads, and your friends would just get in a group and you had a shared interest and you all just hung out. So we have that part of it. We now have a chat option, which has been great because you can actually open the browser as its own URL on your laptop, and you can actually chat while you're working.
And your employer doesn't know because they don't see any
There's
nudes.
no naked stuff.
So
we don't
is it like a
nudes.
general chat, or is it?
Yeah,
like
it's just like an old chat? School.
Both, actually. You can do a person-to-person chat, or you can do. We have a couple of different general chat rooms that you can get into. So
like groups, for example.
We have the ability to set that up. We haven't set up many groups. We have two. Like right now, we have 2 groups, and then personally, I have 3 different individual chats going on.
Look at you,
so,
Mr. Social.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised by that.
I've done a lot in the last week.
So,
and then we also.
What was the intention of this place when you decided to create it?
It really just started out as wanting to be able to hang out with cool fellow naturists, when we weren't on a vacation destination or whatever. Mm-hmm. And what it has evolved into is finding out that, the largest organization in the States is not diverse and doesn't like young people. Mm-hmm. And I like diversity and I like young people. So it has evolved into this wonderful community of naturists we have 30% brown, 30% black, 30% white. I checked the stats, and I think we're actually about 40% LGBTQ, and I think we're about 40% women. So when I started this, it was one little white woman gallivanting all over the internet, trying to find people that weren't going to be gross, that were going to send me DMs, that were going to treat other people with respect. And what happened was I had our Instagram open, and we were growing really quickly, but I kept getting so much abuse that I just turned it off one day. I was like, I've had enough with these Trump supporters sending me shit. I've had enough with, unsolicited DNV pics. I'm done. This is disgusting. I want nothing to do with this whole nudist, naturist, whatever thing. But I understand that happens. So I calmed down. And I was still like, I know they're out there. And, the marketer in me, it was like, you can find them, Mandy. They're out there somewhere. Because that goes back to finding your ideal client, right? And my ideal client is someone that is like us, that's open, that's chill, that's cool, down to have a good time, respectful, makes people feel like they belong when they're part of your community. And we have built that entire community, and I'm so excited. And it really started when I closed my Instagram account. And what I did for us, I not only closed our Instagram account and reopened it as a closed account, but I changed our logo because it was around the time of Pride, and I just realized, one, it's the right thing to do to promote that, and then two, all of those Trump supporters will go away. And they did. And so
when you fly the pride flag, a lot of times
they seem to run.
They run. And those are the types of people that we want to attract, because that's our crew. That's our people. And while it may sound a little odd that Mandy's rattling off these stats and it's informal stats, because we actually don't track people by their ethnicity or anything. This is just kind of an eyeball. But a lot of the experience that we've had in the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast nude parks is that it's predominantly white, and that's something that we did, and a lot of Trump flags. And we wanted to get away from that, and we wanted to celebrate diversity with our friends. And I think I
don't want to just hang out with white people.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the fun in that?
I don't have a problem with hanging out with white people, but
but you want diversity too, right? I mean, that's the spice of life, is having different opinions from different places.
Yeah, I think in what we've seeked is more of a approximation to representation of the real world. So we are not our demographic tends to be young and more open to a lot of topics. So we do have a lot of young LGBT members. I think maybe the gay community is probably about 40% of our demographic. But we also have people that are of all age groups. We've focused mainly on 18 plus, like 18 years plus. We don't allow any minors. And this out of a suggestion from a lawyer that Mexico doesn't have the history that the US has of family naturist clubs and resorts and things like that. So here it can become a pretty big, like, social and legal deal. And we kind of don't want to go through that right now. Yeah. We don't feel like we're ready for that. So we focus more on adults, but we have members that are 70 plus that aren't the majority, but we also have members that are 18 to 25. Our demographic tends to be around 25 to 35 years old.
Well, we've also focused on adults, and a lot of that has to do, again, with suggestions from attorneys and and laws. And
those are always helpful.
Even though there has been a family naturist movement in the United States, that's just something that we feel like there's enough people that have that covered, that we wanted to go in a different direction. And I think as long as people are positive and supporting, it's okay.
Young-minded.
Yes, we also wanted to be young-minded, but I think as long as people are out there with complementary clubs or groups, I think there's a lot of room for a lot of different opportunities out there for folks.
I agree. And I also don't like, I don't have a problem with variety, as I mentioned before, but I personally don't like to focus on limiting the participation. So we don't consider ourselves a young naturist group or a couple naturist group or whatever. Like, we want to build an environment where everyone feels safe, comfortable, and welcome. And that means that you could be 100 years old, or you could be 18 years old, you could be single, you could be male, female, or whatever you identify with, and you could be in a relationship or in numerous relationships or whatever, and we don't care.
Yeah,
exactly. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we adopt a similar philosophy, and just by way of really putting out our vibe. I think we do a good job of, as Mandy often says, attracting and repelling at the same time. And we've just been naturally landing into a great spot with our members.
Well, it's really easy the minute you say something bad about Trump, 50% of those people go running. So it's actually really easy to repel people right now.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the success is to build a model where people reject themselves. So
Yes.
Yes.
we have an integration process that I sometimes feel like we make people jump through hoops, but we do this because we want people to know exactly what they're getting into. And we explain to them, like, this is the process that you have to follow in order to participate. And some of the process involves answering like common, or how would you, common sense questions. Like, for example, we and one of the rules is avoid commenting on other people's bodies. And it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, just, let their bodies be. And it's very clearly stated on the rules. And we ask people, like, if you encounter someone you consider to be physically attractive and you want to tell them how beautiful they look, what do you do? And most people will either say, I'll keep it to myself, or they'll say, I'll tell them with all due respect that you have the most beautiful breasts that I've seen in my life. So it's very clear what people's interest is. And
Yeah.
and we use that as a metric to decide whether it's the person understands what we're looking for or not.
I love that, because one of my main issues is telling women that they can't have their swimsuit bottoms on. And
They
I
can't
said
have
that
what?
their swimsuit bottoms on.
Oh,
And I had an older woman come up to me and tell me, you can just shove your tampon string up there and take your bottoms off. And I was like, you have no right to tell me those things. And so I love that you have that as, part of your, I guess, rules, because people sometimes think that they can say the weirdest things to you, and just because you're in, the same social circle. But no.
No, I actually, that's a really good point. I also appreciate that. I had somebody approach me and actually touch my arm where I had my tattoo and tell me how much they loved my tattoo. And it really felt creepy to have somebody come up and just, in a nude setting, touch my arm and say, I love your tattoo. It
well,
felt
just like any setting, if a stranger walks up to you in the street and touches your arm, it's like,
yeah. Well, maybe if you were in a singles bar or something, okay, but not when you're barbecuing ribs at a nude park and somebody comes up and starts fondling your arm. It's just weird.
yeah, setting up, how would you say, barriers, or not barriers,
Boundaries.
Yes, setting up
Yeah.
boundaries is very important. So we make sure that people understand the boundaries of the place that we want to create a vibe. And the vibe we want it to be as welcoming as possible. So we want to address the types of common behaviors that can be perceived as invasive behavior. So we want to be like an entrance to naturism. And from there on, people could decide what type of variation they're interested in. And that's great. We don't want to have the entire market. We just want people to get to know naturism, or at least our version of it. And once they're there, they're going to meet a lot of variety of people that have variety of interests. And then they can start their own hangout groups with their own friends and do their own thing. And that's great.
It's a really great way to get them integrated into it, like, this is the way it should be done. And, you may not encounter all of these great boundaries and consent everywhere you go, but this, you're at least showing these new people how it could and should be done, which I think is great.
Yeah, and they can choose. I think the priority for us is for people to have a choice. They can choose whether what we're offering is what they're looking for or not.
It's just like any other interest or hobby or lifestyle. You choose your own niche, and whether it's boating or bicycling or roller skating or whatever.
Naked paddleboarding.
Naked paddleboarding. Yes, exactly.
That
But
sounds like fun.
you kind of you kind of choose your thing. And
to choose your own adventure.
It really is. It really is. You know, back when we were earlier in the conversation, we were talking about the differences between landed clubs and beaches. One of the other things that we've really enjoyed is some of the hot springs. And we've actually found that there's a big variety in the types of hot springs that you can go to and enjoy. And some of the ones that we have found that are the best are the ones that are the hardest to get to.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you have to hike, you know, 300 miles, and then no, not really, but you have, it
Wow.
seems like you have to hike 300 miles, but you have to hike a long way in, and they have really strict rules about how to care for the environment, versus some of the ones that are just right off the freeway pullout that anybody can hop out to and toss their beer cans and destroy. So, you know, it doesn't matter what aspect of naturism you take a look at. There's different, it's a spectrum, you know, it really is, and people are going to choose the different areas that they're comfortable with.
So going back to the social media, what is one of the challenges that you guys, or some of the challenges that you guys have faced in creating a social media platform?
That question is actually probably good for you, because you're the one that, you're not the tech guy.
You know, it's really because part of our screening process is actually putting the membership behind a paywall, and having people understand the value in the paywall has been probably the biggest challenge. In fact, we had a member that joined us and then left, canceled his membership, and then he came back. And when he came back, he said, yeah, I realized the value of the membership, and I missed my friends, and I missed, you know, these things about this platform. So it was really good to better understand that some people are going to find value in it, and others are not. And we're hoping to attract those who find the value, but sometimes communicating that value can be the difficult part.
Well, and that's why yes, we do have a product that we sell, but really what we're doing is building a community. So, you know, anytime that you can build a movement, people buy into the value of what you're building because they're part of it. So it's been great. Interesting, and building, the hardest part of building it was I keep breaking it. I keep adding features and then things break. But because we are building a community where everyone has what was I saying yesterday? There's three things: shared interest, shared passion, over communication, and I had three things to a good relationship. But what happens is, because you're building a movement of people that have a shared passion, shared beliefs, and they believe in it, when things break, they're like, that's cool, just let us know when it's fixed.
Okay.
But
well, just yesterday we were testing a feature on our website, and
live chat.
Yeah, it was a live, well, it was a video streaming, a live video within the community, and one of our members volunteered to just help us through the process, because it was the first time that we had used that part of the website. So it was it's really good when you have people that are part of your
They're
group,
there to help out,
and they're there to help out. Yeah.
But part of the reason I keep breaking it too is because I keep adding security. Like, the last thing I ever want to happen is anybody's nude photos to show up online because I got hacked. I would feel horrible. Plus, I don't need people losing their jobs. If you lose your job in the States, you lose your health insurance, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, I do not want to be that person that does that to anyone. So I get alerts every day about people, you know, bots trying to jump in and infiltrate. So we're always keeping track of the security. And an interesting part to that too is that we actually have two people in the community who are grateful for the paywall because they are either divorced or getting divorced, and maybe their lifestyle has changed since they were married or what have you. And they really appreciate having a place to go where they can share their life with other like-minded people without their kids seeing or their exes or family members. I'm so sorry, that's my alarm. So, you know, unlike something like True Nudists, which seems like a place where they built this social platform and then don't pay attention to it, we're in there. The hardest part is actually probably the attention I have to pay to it, but it's not hard because going in there is hanging. Every time I go in there to check something out, I'm hanging out with my friends. So it's been a really fun experiment because working for me now means hanging out with my friends naked. So
Not a bad way to spend a day,
yeah,
even if it is online.
I've mentioned this before, that I think that the biggest challenge that these new social media, because there's a couple that are trying to do what you guys are doing, a couple of people. I think the challenge is getting people to use it, like the wide adoption of a platform. And based on what you guys are telling me and what I've learned from the other experiences, is that they're becoming like niche social media that are focused on a specific demographic or group of the Naturist community. So you guys probably don't have the problem of wanting everyone to use it. You want specific audience or specific clientele to be a part of it. Is that true?
absolutely. But that's just marketing 101, as always, you know, finding your ideal client and then grabbing them. And our ideal client is people that are cool and like to hang out naked.
Mhm. And that's another
So, I
interesting
mean,
thing. You can target an audience, but it's not guaranteed that you attract that audience, because when I wanted
it is once you put the rainbow flag up, apparently.
I think I noticed this
That really was a game changer
difficulty
for us.
when I wanted to create content towards a specific demographic, wanted to attract more of. I noticed that it doesn't matter what type of content I create. Maybe I have a specific demographic that is attracted to what I do, and there was a time where I wanted to change it, but now I've embraced it. It's like, this is my audience, so it doesn't matter if they're not the way that I want them to be. But that's different in the creation process than it is when it comes to building a community. Setting up, for example, in a community, setting up specific guidelines or specific culture will determine who your audience is.
Well, and I think that's been easy for us because one of the things that Mandy often says is that we run around like curious 5-year-olds on the weekend. We like to try a lot of different things. The common factor for us is feeling safe in doing so.
Mhm.
And so we've just been documenting what we do and how we live our life and the cool people that we hang out with. And we want to, and those people that we hang out with, that's the demographic that we're targeting. So for us, it's really easy to figure out who our customer is because it's the people that we hang out with anyway. And in fact, I just used the term customer. I think it's the first time I've actually used the term
Yeah.
customer.
What is that?
Yeah, because
Oh,
it
because I was talking about marketing.
yeah, because you were talking about marketing because
Just don't say user. That's
yeah,
bad.
because I think about these folks as our friends who help us maintain this social media platform, and that's really how I think of it. Because every time, like we have a couple of friends who are in Montana that they do naked paddle boarding, and I had never thought of being a naked paddle boarder until we became friends. And we missed each other by a few minutes. They came to visit in Washington. We couldn't quite connect our schedules, but we have actually been connecting with individuals in person that we have connected with, and they're part of our of Skinny Dippers. There's another couple that we connected with that we've gone hiking and hot springing with.
But I actually think more importantly, we have a lot of home nudists that now have a place to hang out. And I
Mhm.
think that's really important because I didn't know I was a home nudist. First of all, I think a lot of people might be nudists or naturists and they don't realize it. But a lot of people worldwide don't have a place to go and hang out with fellow nudist or naturist, because some of these places are a 6 hour drive away. So we now have a place for those people, which has been great. I mean, there's nothing worse than feeling passionate about something and not having people to hang out with who share a passion with you. And so really, yeah, we do have a specific demographic, but we also, there's
Can
a
you
lot
tell
of
us a
people in
little
the,
bit about your demographic? Like who participates in the social media?
Yeah, sure. A lot of the folks are they're either LGBTQ themselves, or they are very comfortable as an LGBTQ ally. Excuse me. They tend to be under the age of 50.
we've got couples in there.
There are couples. There are singles. There are we have a couple of folks who date multiple people or see multiple people.
Mhm.
And it is a mix of people who frequent public nude spaces, but we also have some folks that are really trying to better understand how they can get into the nudist and naturist movement, but maybe they live in the Midwest, for example. We have several folks that live in the Midwest, and there's not a lot of options for them.
Mhm.
In the wintertime, it's even worse because it's freaking cold in the Midwest in the wintertime. But those are the folks that tend to be home nudists because they just don't feel like they have the options to go or do anything outside of their community or outside of their home, because there just aren't many options. So I would say LGBTQ friendly.
I like to say we're a block home.
Yeah.
And part of that stems from, I used to read.
Explain. I don't know if Hector, did you have block homes growing up? In the United.
I lived in the States. Is a block home like the community that is built around where you live, or?
No, a block home. There was a movement.
When I was a kid.
Yeah, and actually when I was a kid too, that you would see a placard on a home, and that means that the home was certified as a safe place. So if you're walking through like if I was a kid walking on my route to school, and I felt like I was going to get bullied, or I thought
Mhm.
that the unmarked white van pulling up didn't really have candy for me, then I could look.
You could run to that house.
You could run to that house.
And you knew it was a safe house.
And you knew it was a safe place to be. So,
Oh.
and every block in your neighborhood was supposed to have one of these homes. So that's why it was called a block home.
Mhm.
So I used to ride the bus very late at night for 2 decades because I worked in the middle of downtown. And what would happen was, because I would be out walking at 9 and 10 at night in the dark by myself as a woman, and women by and large are always, our first thing when walking around anywhere late at night when you don't know anyone is, am I going to get raped? So I always sought out everything that was open late was bars. But what I always wanted to find were the gay bars, because I knew they were safe.
Mhm.
I was going to be safe if I ran to them. And so, it's part of why our logo has the rainbow on it, because it's a safe place. It's it just, the safety of the people in our community is so important to me, whether it's in person or online, because there's not a lot of spaces for a wide variety of demographics to be naked. We listen to the new nudist, new nudist podcast, and Evan from Naturous Vintage took his friend Randy, who is Black, to a nudist park in the States, and he had this experience with Trump flags and all of these things, but I never want anyone to feel that way. So
Mhm.
that's why I always go back to the block home thing. I just want people to feel like they belong and safe. I want them to feel safe, because taking your clothes off is such a vulnerable thing for some people, and I want people to feel safe being able to do that, so that they can hang out with their friends, because dude, if you don't feel like you belong somewhere, it's a terrible feeling, and people are so lonely during this pandemic that it's even more important. And it's actually nice to get off social media and get into our community, which is, I like to say, it's a low dopamine experience, because there's not things flashing at you, there's not ads, things aren't popping up, and you can just go in and chill and know that you're safe and just chat with fellow nudists or naturists, and just be left alone.
Where do you envision the Skinny Dippers Club being in a medium future and a long-term future?
Oh, I hope we have 10, 20,000 members in there. Anybody who wants that, I want to come join us. I want to take care of them.
My children.
Yeah, I mean, we listen to what people want, we try to give it to them. It's part of why we're launching a nonprofit called the Global Naturous Alliance, because we've noticed, and from listening to our own community, that social justice is left out, a lot in this community. And I think that needs to be on the forefront of naturism. I mean, if you're not taking care of the humans on the earth, and they're inextricably linked with humans are linked with the earth, and naturalists by and large are environmentalists, I would assume. So you can't leave out that equity and social justice element to these large organizations, because there'll be no gas, there'll be nobody to take it on to the next generation.
And I lost my thought. How do you afford this? Like, how do you make this a sustainable, viable business model?
First of all, this isn't the first business I've had. I was an entrepreneur and worked behind the chair as a hairdresser for years. I own my own brick and mortar. This is not the first one I've done. So the idea really is, it's sustainable because I would do this whether I made money or not. I don't have a problem.
I was going to say you're exactly right. Whether we make money at it or not, these are the friends that we want to hang out with. This is the lifestyle that we have chosen, and we want to hang out with our friends. So the fee that we charge to be behind the paywall is really to help maintain all the things that are done.
It's like $12.97 a month or something.
Yeah, so it's not
expensive.
It's not expensive, but it's also it's not something that it's not a on our end. It's not a get rich scheme or anything like that. It's every dollar that comes in really goes back into the infrastructure of building out the web page.
Well, and
I think people aren't aware of how expensive it is to have a website, and especially if you're hosting content on your website, like the pictures that people upload, the videos or whatever.
Right.
That's ridiculously expensive, and it gets more and more expensive the more people use it. So
yes,
it makes perfect sense. And of course, I mean, I'm of the idea that naturism has to be financially viable. I'm not of the idea that taking your clothes off is free. It is free. It is never free. It's like, even if you take off your clothes at your home,
you have to drive there.
You paid for your rent, you paid for your furniture,
Right.
you paid for, so that not even that's free. Like, if you take off your clothes at a public beach, there's still costs associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
Some are paid through the parking lot, or through the businesses that are built around it, or through tax pay, that people pay, or whatever. So nothing is really free. And the more that we understand that there's a cost associated and there's a value associated with what we're receiving, the more that these projects can grow. So I'm all for people financially supporting things, especially because I think one of the major challenges that I've faced and everything that I've wanted to do was having to focus first on surviving, on
Right.
paying my living expenses, and then whatever I had left was investing in things that I believe in. So, I mean, sometimes people aren't aware of that.
Yeah, but you'll be made far more aware of it if you do jump into True Nudists, because you see that they are not maintaining that. They don't have moderators. You see what happens when you just build something and don't keep at it.
Yeah.
but the other interesting to your question, the other interesting point for me is when I looked at my skill set, and then I looked at the cost of entry, if you will, to this business model. I knew it would work because the need is there. I did the market research. People have been asking for this. And from a business perspective, when I look at how much it costs to build it, versus having to pay, when I had my salon, it was 2,400 square feet and the rent was like $5,000 a month. So I always look at it that way. Like, a brick and mortar is going to cost you this much. How much is this going to cost you? How much work is it going to take? How much work can you do on your own? Like, the amount of stuff that I do is probably an $80,000 a year job. And then, there's the actual cost of the website, of the email service provider, of all the other things. But when I take it through my lens, which is a business owner lens, I say, okay, yes, that does look expensive, but when you look at the value of the whole package and the money that it costs to enter into this, it's actually low if you're looking at it that way. You know what I mean?
Of course. Yeah.
$5,000 a month was a lot of money.
Yes, it is. It's a ton of money.
And that was like 10 years ago. So I don't even know what their lease is now.
When I talk about the cost of living in the States, it's just ridiculous. I think another part of why I've been able to do what I've been doing for so long is because I live in a developing country, and the cost of living here is a fraction of it is in the States. And most of the people that support me are in the States or Canada or Europe or across different countries, where whatever they donate to me a month, it means nothing to them, but it makes a huge difference in my quality of life and allowing. So I feel like I'm outsourcing, or it's like outsourcing to a third world country the promotion of naturism.
It's a very United States business model too.
Oh yeah, it's a transnational perspective of cutting costs, but it makes it viable. And I imagine that someone that is trying to do what I'm trying to do in the States or in Europe or in other places, it's almost impossible because the cost of living is so high. So they would have to have 10 times more supporters than I do in order for them to be able to do what I'm doing. So,
well, and entrepreneurs always say, don't quit your job if you want to be an entrepreneur. You got to be an entrepreneur and have your day job, and then at some point quit your day job. And I mean, that's been true so many times over the years.
Earlier, Mandy mentioned about me running home at the end of the day from work. Maybe we should, why don't we pause? Hector, we're going to pause. Okay. So, one of the things, as we were talking about sustainable business models, and I believe ours will be something that is, but
it already is.
Yeah, it already is. We're doing just fine, but it's really the passion that drives what we do. Mandy mentioned earlier that I wanted to run home at the end of the day and hop on to.
You've said that 3 times now.
I know, but it's so true. It is so true. I don't get a ton of time. I work a full-time job. It's
like a real job, like an adult job.
Yeah. So I'm actually a public works manager for a local government, and it's a very demanding job. It's a very full-time job. But
it's also why you're very in tune with the environment and climate change. I always like to mention that.
Yeah. So
you're always affected by that, because you were up at midnight the other night and I didn't see you for 24 hours.
Yeah, so I manage environmental sciences, and we do projects that are of benefit to the environment, or we try to offset the impacts that man-made infrastructure makes to the environment. So I am in tune with environmental issues quite a bit, but it also means that I don't have a lot of the ability to spend time on naturist websites during the day, because I work in a government role. So I am excited to come home and escape my day job and dive into this community of friends. And I think that passion helps drive the business, because I look at things from a completely different way. Mandy devotes most of her time on Skinny Dippers, and I jump in after hours.
Yeah, you pick up where I'm like, whew, I've been hanging out with these people all day. Can I have a break?
I'm exhausted of hanging out with these people.
Well, it's kind of like being at a party when one of the it's like, okay, I've had enough partying. I gotta go to bed now. And
I gotta go introvert for a little while.
yeah, and I come home from work and I want to dive in and talk to people until 11 o'clock or midnight or whatever.
You have been lately.
Yeah, I have been. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And does your employer know that you're running around naked?
Oh, I have a story to tell to you.
Yeah, you got a couple minutes.
So
back to that healthcare in the States being tied to your job.
Oh boy. So back in February? It was just before the pandemic. Mandy and I were actually invited on a radio talk show. And this radio talk show, I had started listening to it. It was a fairly new radio talk show, although the two celebrities on the show had separate
local celebrities.
Celebrities.
Seattle.
Yes, Seattle, Puget Sound area. They each had their own individual shows before, so they had come together in this new show, and they were looking for some new stories. So
no, I was at Starbucks, because you could be at Starbucks then, and I heard that they were talking about the New York Times article about people cooking naked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're like, if anybody has any experience with doing naked things, I was like, oh damn, that's me. And I was like, and
yeah, so Mandy gets us engaged with this local radio show, and
which is kind of a big deal, we have found out.
Yeah, so we go on the radio show and we talk about living at a nudist park and the things that we do recreationally nude.
There's 300 employees too, by the way.
Yeah, I have about 300 employees, and I didn't realize that all of them were listening to this new radio program. And the majority of the people that I manage all work out in the field, and because they work in the field, they usually listen to the radio because they're traveling from job site to job site. And I never really connected the dots that, my employee base is the target audience for talk radio.
I taught you nothing.
Yeah. So
I've known.
Yeah, because I think about social media and I think about Twitter and all these other things. And I didn't think about the fact that most of my employees would be listening to the radio. So that wasn't terrible, but the cat was out of the bag, and everybody knew. Yeah, very, very publicly. But then after the pandemic started, one of my employees actually found a social media post of mine and then took a screenshot of it, circulated it around.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, circulated it around work, and actually wrote a scathing email to my boss. And my boss actually hadn't really realized that I was a person that liked to run around with my pants off during my off time. And I found out his opinion of that sort of behavior. Yeah. So and I realized how closed-minded sometimes local government can be.
I think we more realized what a lot of people think this is, and I think that actually kind of lit a fire under us to be like, wait, no, that's not what this is.
Yeah. So we actually went through, because that post, and there wasn't anything wrong with the post. I wasn't showing anything. It was actually just a photo of me in a hot tub. Mm-hmm. And I was not clothed, but you couldn't see any genitalia whatsoever. It was actually a tasteful pose. Some in the nudist community would probably say, yeah, why weren't you letting your junk hang out? It would feel more comfortable. But we were mindful of the fact that we were putting this on that it was going to potentially be on social media. So we were careful about the shots that were being taken. But comments like deviant behavior were thrown out there. I had people at work that no longer wanted to speak to me. I got uninvited from some management meetings.
I didn't know that
It
either.
was a really trying time, and I actually thought for a little while that I might either be severely disciplined or
Or
lose
fired.
or lose my job because of the way in which I was being treated by senior level managers within the organization.
So I think
Wow.
that's also partly why I'm so big on security. We're not the only people that experience this, you know?
And I actually have, or we have a friend that is also in government, and he works actually in a more conservative wing of government, although he's a very liberal individual. But he's scared to death that his employer is going to find out that he likes to run around without his pants on the weekends, because he knows he would get fired from his particular position. Yeah, because that's the culture within the organization that he works in.
Hmm.
So
And we're one of the most liberal cities in the nation. Like, I think we voted Democrat blue across the board in the last election, I believe.
yeah. So being in the Seattle metro area, it's a very, very blue area, very blue county.
Open-minded, growth-minded.
Yeah, I have
Yeah,
the,
growth.
the
Yeah,
impression that it's very progressive and liberal. So
yeah.
for me, it's a surprise that you would receive this level of treatment, but I'm very curious to what happened. Like, how did it all play out?
So
Give them the full story.
the way that it played out. So I'm a senior level manager, but I'm in an organization that is highly unionized. So I'm about as high as you can go in the organization and still be in the union.
Hmm.
And fortunately, I had a good union rep that helped me work through this scenario, and we ended up. I did get disciplined for being for having a social media post that was viewable enough for employees to see it,
Hmm.
and I have
Recommend
a
them.
reprimand letter that will be in my file until spring of this year, and
Wow.
and and I have been directed to not engage in that sort of behavior. So, which
So here
is,
we are on YouTube.
yeah. So
Yeah.
here we,
Yeah.
yes, but you'll also notice that I'm wearing a shirt, and I really don't have an issue talking about our activities, just as long as I'm not out in a social media channel where I'm seen without my clothes on.
Did you get the opportunity to educate your colleagues on what this is? Because as you mentioned, they're probably under erroneous impressions of what you guys are doing.
I made an attempt, and part of my discipline at work was I had to give a public apology to all 300 of my employees, and
Sounds
I
like
draft.
medieval.
It does.
It
It
was
does, doesn't it?
so anxiety. I was so filled with anxiety almost all of last year because of this.
So I wrote a draft letter, and my boss had edits for that, so it didn't end up coming out in my voice, but a an apology went out to my employees, and then I spoke about the incident, and gave the company position through this public apology through an all employee meeting forum. And we really haven't talked about it much since. So
I think that was about when I made my Twitter private too, because his employees came onto my Twitter feed and decided to let me know their opinions as well.
yeah, so that was a rough time. Spring of 2020 was rough for a number of reasons, between pandemic, getting some publicity about who we are and what we're doing, and then having that hit at work was
And the
it,
pandemic.
yeah, it was just incredibly tough. It was a rough time.
It's surprising, and now it makes a lot of sense why you guys are so focused towards security and towards anonymity and protection of privacy and so on. Wow. And this is
Yeah,
like the worst nightmare for many people that I've
Yes.
talked to. They're scared to death that their employers would find out, because of situations like this. And to an extent, it could have been worse. Fortunately, it wasn't. You could have lost your job. You could have, you know, and probably banned out. But at the same time, for me, it's surprising for a liberal, progressive, open-minded government to handle things like if they were the most orthodox Republicans.
I agree with you. I was shocked the way in which I was treated, but on the other hand, I wasn't shocked because I've been in government long enough to know how government is run and who runs it and what kind of microaggressions exist within government, not towards nudism specifically, but towards minority groups and education levels. Um, so while it was disappointing, it also wasn't incredibly surprising. I had another situation last year that also kind of contributed. I was also shocked. We had an individual that used they them pronouns start with the organization, and having been around people in my non-landed nudist group, I'd had the opportunity to be around some nudist transgender people and get to know them and become friends and understand some of the frustrations that they had with the nudist community. So I actually applied that at work. And when I found out that we had an employee coming to work who's transgender and used they them pronouns, I decided that one of the things that would be nice to help them fit into work would be to change the bathroom identifiers from a men's and women's restroom to restrooms that were non-gender specific that were labeled with the amenities that they featured. So what had traditionally been called the men's restroom had now a label that showed that it had a urinal and a stall and sink, and it was handicap accessible. And then what had been
pictures, right?
Yeah, it was just pictograms,
Pictures of what is in this space.
exactly. And I did that because one of the other facilities that this individual was going to be working at was in downtown Seattle, and the only gender neutral restroom was in the basement of the building. So for them to feel comfortable walking into a restroom, they had to leave the floor that they were on, and it was not a high-rise building, but it was an 8-story building, and they would have to go into the parking garage, which is in the basement.
Which never feels safe.
No, and then you go into this restroom that was in non-gender specific restroom, but it's the same restroom that the janitorial staff uses. So the mop bucket and the cleaning station and everything is in there, and it's just kind of a dingy, gross restroom. So I wanted to make that new employee feel comfortable and welcome at my facility. And the amount of crap that I got for making that change.
You thought you were going to get fired again.
Yeah, I thought I was going to get in trouble for that because there was no policy about gender neutral restrooms, even though I manage my outlying facilities and I can set my own policies in many cases. They did not like the fact that I set my own policy around labeling the restrooms.
Not making your new employee feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Feeling like they belong.
Yeah. So that also just made me want to put more emphasis and work into Skinny Dippers Club to make sure that we were appealing to that entire group that feels like they want to be a part of something greater. I use my nude beach experiences and my friendship experiences to try to make it a better place.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, well, I think this discussion is very interesting. The discussion whether in Naturous settings, should there be men and women's restrooms? Because most of the time we segregate or separate because one, we feel like men can't keep it to themselves. It's impossible for animals to control their impulses. And two, it also has to do with the privacy of seeing another person's body or whatever. And in nature settings, I've been in places where there is men's and women's rooms, and when there's just a general restroom that everyone uses. And a lot of places that I really love the experience of having the showers like outdoors, where anyone could just shower, and I think that's really awesome because it really helps create like a connection with people. Like you can chat with someone while you're taking a shower and so on.
Totally.
So I feel like in a way, naturism already is inclusive enough to whoever wants to use the restroom or whoever wants to use the shower. Doesn't matter how you identify. Um, it's just open and
Well, and
respect.
something that's interesting here on the off season before the pandemic, our bathrooms are closed right now, but we were all showering with each other in whatever restroom we chose. And honestly, half the time we're like, oh, the heater works better in this one. Let's all go shower there.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't think it would be too crazy to say that it would work because it's like you said, the outdoor showers, everybody's already hanging out together anyhow. You're
Yeah.
already, you know,
Once you see somebody shower, I mean,
soaping up their bits.
yeah, 99% of the time when you go into a restroom, they have stall doors anyway, because as comfortable as I am being around
Oh, yeah.
other naked people, I don't necessarily want to have them see me pooping.
Yeah.
So
I
I mean,
agree.
there are some things that are still private.
Yeah.
But having just a single restroom that has stalls, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. And I guess I don't. And I applied that same logic to the restrooms at work, because even though you go into a restroom, whether it was previously designated as male or female, even the urinals had stall doors on them. So
Mhm.
I didn't think it would be an issue at all to change those restroom facilities. It was,
Oh, you're
but
cute.
Did they make you change it, or did they accept them at the end?
they ended up accepting it at the end, and the entire organization is adopting a new policy that they will be applying to facilities throughout the
Are they
organization.
using your sign that you made?
They're actually using the signage that I
Good.
had designed. So
That's awesome.
Exciting.
so some good came out of that.
Yeah.
Of
But
course.
it was really rough, because I was actually faced with perhaps needing to take them down. That was initially the direction, but that was after the employee had started, and I think that definitely would have sent the wrong message.
Of course, like this person would have been very happy because um would it be he or she or they? I don't know how the pronoun thing works. I'm sorry. It's I think it's
It was
more predominant in the States. I've seen that than
mm,
necessarily here in Mexico. So I'm always curious when people include in their profile the pronouns that they identify with, because I don't really understand how it works.
well, for this individual, they wanted to be identified as they or them,
Okay.
and I think that's the using proper pronouns is really important in the United States, because the culture has been developed in such a way, particularly in the transgender community, that people who are transitioning, sometimes they are more comfortable going from um, her or she to they or them, because they are
It's
experiencing the
neutral.
feelings of, yeah, it's neutral, and they're transitioning. And sometimes people transition through pronouns, so they may start out as he him and go through the transition to use they them pronouns, and then once they feel like they have transitioned to a point, they switch to a new set of pronouns, and they use her and she. So
Okay.
it all depends on where a person is in the transition, and how comfortable they are, or how they identify. And the pronoun movement here has really been one that opens up conversation. I know that at there's been a couple of nude beaches I've gone to, and I've engaged with individuals, and we've talked about social justice and pronouns, and it's been an interesting topic, particularly when people are nude and visiting like some of the public spaces that are clothing optional. One individual that I spoke with, they were transitioning from male to female, and they hadn't had reconstructive surgery done yet, so they were much more comfortable wearing um, bottoms. So and I understood that they wanted to feel the freedom of being out in a public space and being out as nude as they were comfortable with.
It's interesting how clothing optional in a nude space actually invites more people, can invite more people to the movement for these reasons. I mean, you wouldn't think of it that way until you have different voices that you're listening to and giving you feedback about how they feel in those nude spaces.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And I think because of the work, the work that I do at work and the friends that we have, that's why we end up focusing on a lot of the public spaces and a lot of the spaces that don't require people to strip down to nothing. Although we participate in those activities personally, I know that some of our members may not feel comfortable doing so.
And you guys also, besides the social media, have a podcast, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Started it.
Yeah, we just started the Naturous Podcast, and I think we're on episode 5.
Just finished 4.
Just finished 4. And I think you just launched put the first one up on.
So it started because Jeremy found his Boy Scout book, his Boy Scout field guide. And I was like, this field guide thing is interesting. And, we're coming off this discussion about the use of pronouns. And I realized that needs to be part of naturism. If we're going to include everyone who wants to run around in the woods naked, it has to be inclusive to everyone. So, I would love, we're going to create a field guide, which is part of the point of the podcast, is to really get feedback on everyone from all over the world and how they experience naturism. Mm-hmm. And that was interesting what you said, that you guys don't use pronouns as much as we do in the States.
We do have pronouns, and we use a lot of feminine and masculine, but I guess I didn't identify it as the way that you guys use it in the States. But it's more here we use E instead of A or O. For example, A, every pronoun that ends in A, like ella, means her, and every pronoun that ends in O would either mean all or male. So what we use is E instead of A or O. So the E is neutral.
Oh, I'm taking a note on that.
It's a little bit different the way that it's used in Mexico.
I love that.
But it has a lot to do with the nuances of the language.
Absolutely.
I took a couple of years of Spanish, and I have lost most of it, but that's one of the things I remember most is the proper way to conjugate verbs and to put the feminine or masculine.
It's a nightmare to learn.
Yeah, but well, English is no simple language to learn either.
No. The difficult thing about English is that everyone pronounces words the way that they want to pronounce them. So like schedule or schedule or I don't know, just a ton of different ways to pronounce things, and there's no guidance. It's like you see the letters, but whatever those individual letters sound like means nothing to whoever's pronouncing it.
And there's so many different dialects of English, or the people in the southern part of the United States have a certain drawl, where the people in the Midwest states have they really articulate certain letters in a different way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Mandy and I were just talking about this the other day. It's the difference between butter or butter and butter.
And butter.
Yeah, butter and butter.
Yeah, I grew up. I lived a couple of years in the States, 8 years when I was a child, from 4 to 12, and I was in Columbia, South Carolina, and I was also in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, like Sevier County, Tennessee. And in Tennessee, they had this really deep Southern accent. Some people I could understand perfectly well, and other people it was just really, really, really difficult to understand what they were trying to say. And it was generally the older population that spoke with a very deep accent. And sometimes they would yell at me, asking me if I don't understand English, like, "Arr!" And it was really difficult. But
sounds about right.
That's when you want to turn around and reply to them, I understand English perfectly. It's you I don't understand.
yeah, I mean, I didn't want to be confrontational with the school bus driver.
Probably good.
Oh, okay, that puts a different picture on it.
But yeah, he was in charge of taking me home safely.
Good idea not to push back there.
Yeah, but it's really interesting how, like, the way that different languages operate or work, these type of situations apply differently, or probably don't apply, because I think there's languages where they're more gender neutral than others.
Right. Which is something that we would like to put in this Naturist field guide, so that, we want it to be a globe. I'm gonna let Jeremy take over, because when he was writing an article last year about the flag, the United States flag, and your working document.
Oh, so
he just explains it better than I do.
So last summer, and this was after I went through those 3 different issues at work, being on the radio show, the social media post, and then the restroom experience, I started thinking about things that we do in the United States. And this was in the middle of the big political campaign of Trump versus Biden, and a lot of comments were coming out. And this was actually right around the 4th of July, which is the United States Independence Day. And traditionally, people in the United States do big celebrations, fireworks, and they recreate, battles from the American Revolution, and it's a big deal. But I decided to start thinking about this in a different way. And so I started doing some research on the United States flag and the Pledge of Allegiance and the Declaration of Independence. And I really helped that kind of influence how we approach this field guide. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of documents that we use in the United States of America that get edited along the way. U.S. Constitution, for example, there are amendments to the Constitution, and it's a living, breathing document that it gets modified to meet the needs of the citizens of the United States. Declaration of Independence, however, when we want the entire country to celebrate the Declaration of Independence, when you read it, it reads as if we were still back in the 1700s, and the references to Native Americans being savages is in there. The reference about breaking away from the British government, and all of these things that were relevant at the time have never been changed. So we ask people, including Indigenous people, to celebrate the Declaration of Independence when we actually call them out as savages in the Declaration. So I wrote this blog post about what we should have been doing since 1776 is use the Declaration of Independence as a Google Redline document, a Google Doc, and we make edits to it along the way, much like we did with the U.S. Constitution. So instead of declaring ourselves free from Britain, if we really wanted to have a homogenous United States that embraces everyone and is truly this melting pot, and bring it up to current standards, then we would announce to the world, rather than just to England, that we are this country. And we would have struck out that language about Native American Indian savages, and we would have changed the language and changed the pronouns and done all these things. So that's kind of what started this idea about this field book.
Naturist field guide.
Naturist field guide is thinking about how we can have a living, breathing document that people can use to figure out whether they want to go to an all nude space, or a nudist beach, or a hot spring, or what to expect, and basically help people walk through their experience.
And consent language, like you talked about at your events, like I always say, like, you can know all the things before you go to these events, but you could show up and it could be something completely different. And one of the things we were just talking about is, go with a friend that's already done it. That's probably the safest way to get into naturism, is to go with someone who's already been doing it. But for people that don't have any of those, Jeremy found a Facebook group to get into it. Well, what if someone doesn't even know that? There could be a complete guide that you hand someone.
Or what if Facebook has finally decided to pull the plug on all nudist activities, which I know that you've experienced.
There's legislation happening that might make that happen.
It seems to be going in that direction, that most social media will permanently ban us. And it's really frustrating because it takes so much time and effort and resources to build these communities. And with a click of a button, it's gone.
Yep.
With no appeal process. They say that there's an appeal process, but I had tried to launch an Instagram page, and
you had the word nude in the title.
I had the word nude in the title, and it got shut down
like 3 days.
Yeah, like 3 days later, and it was so frustrating.
It is. Now imagine investing years of work and effort and content and creativity and just eliminating it. It's really frustrating. And I think that's why one of the solutions is to create places for naturists. Just one of the difficulties that I see is that it's going to be really hard to make it something more mainstream if that was a specific goal. I don't think it necessarily has to be a goal. But the idea is to offer people who are getting started, who want to be a part of the community, who want to get to know and so on, who want to express themselves in a safe and comfortable environment. And there's so many elements that are required. And then I also see that there's going to be sort of a little bit of competition, which is going to be great, because it's going to provide more variety. But I hope someday we can just coexist in the ones that already, like the platforms that already exist, that we can be on Twitter, that we can be on Facebook, that we can be on Instagram. And I think a lot of it goes down to the lack of the institutions. They haven't modernized. There's really big institutions like ANR, like the International Naturous Federation, like national federations in different countries, but none of them have understood that they're living in the era of internet and the era of social media.
Yes.
And since they haven't understood this, since they're still sending faxes and like telegrams and the Morse code messages, they don't understand the area of opportunity that they're missing out on, not building movements and institutions that are fighting against censorship, and more of fighting against censorship, educating social media on who we are, what we stand for, and why it's important, why our message is valuable to society in general. And until that changes, we're going to be pushed around and censored and quiet, and it's going to be difficult to get the message out. I think at the end of the day, the difficulty or the stressful part is we need more people to hear our message.
Well, and you bring up the ANR, and one of our biggest issues in the States is that our biggest institution that is promoting nudism is they've used porn photos in their publications and in their social media feeds, and many people have called them out on it, and they have done nothing about it. They've had young people, LGBTQ people of color on their committees, and they've since been kicked off of them or were undermined and their contracts canceled. Like, if the main organization in the States at the highest levels on Twitter, people that you and I know, are voting and doing things that are inherently racist and homophobic, that's the face of nudism in the States. And that's not what we're about. So, not only we're fighting the Zuckerbergs and the Jack Dorseys, but we're also fighting our own institutions that aren't putting out the correct message about who we are. Like, the ANR keeps putting out porn photos on social media. You're just shooting yourself in the foot.
I've always thought that if there's two ways, you could either put time and effort into wanting to bring these institutions to the 21st century, which is going to be very difficult, or you can concentrate your time and effort into building alternatives that uh, address these type of issues. And what I like and what I'm seeing is that more and more people are understanding that we need these institutions, we need these websites, we need these organizations, and we're starting to build them. I think it's going to be better bang for your buck to invest into something that can be created with this new world in mind than to want to change these institutions. These institutions will probably never change, or will change when it's in their best interest. And right now they're in a very comfortable state because some of them work as a chamber of commerce for private clubs. And as long as the private clubs are paying their fees, they're going to be happy. But the thing is, what they don't understand is that their customer base is going to die of old age.
Yeah.
And if that happens, the institution has to evolve at some point or it will disappear. But it's just the way that things work. And I don't see that necessarily as a good thing or a bad thing. I just feel like if they don't evolve, they're going to disappear.
Well, and we see that with the parks already. Parks in the states that have not evolved have lost membership. They've lost money. And
there was a park near us that closed. They couldn't sustain their membership any longer, and they actually sold their park to a Campgrounds of America franchise. So those members ended up leaving. We had a couple of them actually came to our park, but their business model, again going kind of back to the business models, it wasn't sustainable. It was a volunteer-run organization. They were an ANR affiliate park, and there just wasn't the activity or the draw to keep them sustainable. And we're in the Pacific Northwest, where we get
it's rainy and cold
6 weeks of really good summer, and that's about it. So
but we've seen that even with our own government. The Republicans they were being terrible until they were defunded. Everyone stopped giving them money, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, we'll go do the right thing now. I mean, the money talks.
Money is a good motivation.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to money, moral is very flexible.
Yes.
For a lot of people, yes.
Yes.
All right, guys.
On that note.
So I want to thank you very much for taking the time. I'd definitely like to have a follow-up conversation in the future to see how the projects that you guys are doing, how they're evolving, and maybe once this mess from the pandemic is over, maybe when you guys have, when you guys have the opportunity to start more in-person activities and building a local community and that kind of stuff, that's going to be interesting to see how it evolves. I'm also very interested in seeing how the website evolves, the community that's built there, and so on. So I want to thank you guys. Is there anything else that you guys would like to mention before we close today's conversation?
If you want to listen to another Naturous podcast, we have one. So naturouspodcast.com.
Yes, and you guys can find all these links in the description, the skinnydippers.club website, or the social media accounts and everything that we talked about. I'm going to make sure that I include all those links.
Awesome.
So thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you very much,
this is a
Mandy.
pleasure.
Thank you. We wish you great success as well, Hector.
And anything you need, let us know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for listening to this episode. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.